All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Talkin Investing. I'm Tom. I'm here with George. How are you, George?
I just get a really big ego when I'm right, Tom. And, I guess that what would they say? Oh, even a blind squirrel gets right twice or something. I don't know where that goes like that or something like that.
I think you're mixing your metaphors, but welcome and hello. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today was when it was all said and done with, today was totally sideways for Bitcoin, but we're going to talk about the journey today. The Bitcoin miners had a relatively modest day. Some stuff happened this week, though. We got a lot to go through, a lot on Bitcoin, a lot on the Bitcoin miners, a lot on some data that came out this week, a bunch of FUD that came out this week, a couple articles just today and yesterday. I mean, and I'm going to start out by saying I think there's pure panic out there right now, and we'll talk about why I think that. I don't know. September, people are terrified about September in general and in Bitcoin in specific. So we're going to get into talking about that, and I'm going to see what you guys think. I know, and we've talked about this on previous streams, on the members only stream. We've talked about the fact that, there's not a lot of optimism surrounding September. I've had probably 15 different people ask me, are you worried about September? And, this is growing to a crescendo. So I want to go through that and see what you guys think, obviously. And if you can do us a great big favor and smash the like button, we would really appreciate it. We're at 7 likes right now. We're shooting for 100 and then 200. So please do us a favor. It helps the stream out in real time. George,
you're not going to believe this. And Edmund, I'm so glad you brought that up. I am not negative on Bitcoin short term. I think come the 3rd, there's going to be a pump in Bitcoin. Again, none of this is financial advice, and that's how I'm playing it. I did get back into a few miners, Bitcoin miners, and I am thinking that we're going to have a nice little pump before we have a massive dump.
So
that's what I think is going to happen.
You think up and then down?
Yes.
So
I think it's setting up perfectly, honestly, because if you look at all the freaking, what were you telling me? The one option that you made me buy?
I did not make you buy that. In fact, I didn't buy it, but I showed it to you, and we'll wait for a few people to get online, but it's one of the pieces of evidence I would point towards that there's a panic going around. Maybe it's, in the United States, we're having a long weekend, so that's one extra day for Bitcoin to move, and, we're going to move from August. So for the equity markets in the U.S., well, everywhere really, the next time we can trade equities, it's going to be September. And, there's this panic around September that I've never seen this before. I'm not panicking. I will tell you, I did start out the option that George is talking about. I started out by looking at the opposite. I was going to put, and I think a lot of people may have a similar concept, because it is a 3-day weekend. I was going to see if I could find some cheap protection and buy some puts. The price of the put options for, I was looking at BITO, which is the Bitcoin futures. That's the 1-to-1 with the Bitcoin that trades. It's not one of the ETFs. It's trading futures, not, it doesn't hold Bitcoin. And it was around before the ETFs, and they have options on it, and the options are quite active. So oftentimes if I'm looking to go one way or the other in the short term, and again, I do that on a smaller frame. So I was looking to see, well, maybe I'll just put a little protection on over the weekend. Well, I guess I'm not the only one who had that idea, because I've never seen the volatility, the options for Bitcoin this weekend. The puts were 10 times as expensive as the calls. And actually it was like 6 or 7 times as expensive, which is a gigantic difference. You know, and it was right at a point where BitO, when George and I were looking at this together, BitO was trading at $19.01. So you couldn't be any closer to exactly in the money. So, you know, a straddle on that would be a $19 call and a $19 put. You'd expect those to be somewhere in the neighborhood of the same price. Well, one was 18 cents and one was like $1.30. And you know, that was the put. So the in the money put was just, so obviously I did not buy any. You know, I've been holding forever. So, you know, I thought if I could pick something up cheap, and I look, you know, for every time I buy something, I look 20 times. So I did not.
So I did the Hail Mary.
So George did the opposite.
The Hail Mary.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, you know, the puts were so expensive, you know, unless there's a catastrophe over the weekend, to me, it just didn't make any sense. But George, you know, felt like, and I agree, for 18 or 19 cents at the money, I mean, you know, if Bitcoin runs, now these are short-term options. They expire next Friday. In the United States, there's one less trading day, so they have 4 days, not 5 days. But I think it speaks to the panic that people have going into September, that, you know, something, you know, there's this ominous feeling that something awful. I will tell you, I don't have that feeling. And you know, yeah, we're trading inside of a range. We are right in the middle. I'm going to switch over to that. And I'm going to ask if everybody, again, if you could do us a giant favor and please smash the like button if you would. We're at 24 likes. We're shooting for 100. And it really does make a gigantic difference for the stream. Okay, so I'm going to go to the one. Actually, I'm going to go to this chart. So this is on the 1 day time frame. And so you can see, you know, we kind of got, everybody's looked at this. You guys have seen this, whether it's here or on other channels. We're in a descending wedge, you know, and in the short term, that's a bearish, you know, that's bearish. In a longer term time frame, we hope that this looks like a bull flag, and ultimately we break out of the top of this to much higher numbers. But, you know, until we do so, you know, in the short term, this is kind of a bearish pattern. It's lower highs, it's lower lows, and we're right in the middle, right? So trying to predict, when you're right here, you know, trying to predict, is this next or is this next? I mean, it almost seems like a fool's errand. This is the hardest part of, especially since, you know, we ran up off the bottom and it seemed like we were running towards the top, but now we've had a pullback. And there's also, these are all terrible lines. Let me get rid of them. There is a little line we're at right now. And so I'll zoom in a little bit. And you'll see, like, right, and we're a little under it right now. We're at 58,900. And somewhere more like, you know, you can see all of these are 1 day candles. So this one, this one, this one, this one. There's all these 1 day candles. Even if you were to just start from, you know, from here, somewhere around $59,500 over the last 3 days has turned into resistance, which is holding today. Now, that is a very short period of time. This is a very, very weak line of resistance. I saw a whole article about how Bitcoin's going to crash because new resistance is at, you know, $59,800. And unless we break out of that in the next, you know, 24 hours, we're all doomed, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, a 3 or 4 day pattern like this is not much. But even if you were to extend the line out, you can see there's a bunch of days. So there's something going on here. But again, I mean, this just splits the range that we're in right in the middle. So are we going to retest the top? Are we going to retest the bottom? And in the long term, does it really matter in the long term? Obviously, it matters to all of us in the short term. Nobody wants to see our portfolio go down, you know, over the weekend or next week or whatever the case may be. But, you know, if we do go do this, and you know, like George said, none of this is financial advice. Everybody needs to do what they do. But to me, I will buy. I mean,
well, let me say something, Tom. This will probably shock everybody.
Yes.
But because we have had 2 negative candles below our range, I believe now we're going to have 2 candles above the range. And then after that, then I think there's going to be a drop that is just going to pretty much shake a lot of people out. But I don't think that's coming this next week or two.
So
does that make sense?
So the hard part is, because this is Friday, so we have a Saturday candle, a Sunday candle, a Monday candle. And if you're in the U.S., if you're trading the equities, you know, whether it be the Bitcoin miners or the ETFs or the options, your next opportunity to cash in on that is Tuesday here, you know, in the U.S. equity market. So, you know, if you think the next move is up, can it hold through next week? And the other rule, you know, the one rule we always talk about is when everybody agrees that one thing is going to happen, you know, more often than not, that's one of the best indicators that the other thing is going to happen.
All right.
So, you know, that's no guarantee either. But, you know, being a contrarian, you know, more often than not, especially when there's massive consensus. So I'm going to do a poll real quick and let's see what the consensus is here.
So I did buy today, and I have been DCA and back into Bitcoin too, by the way.
Okay. I'm just going to ask a quick, we'll start super generic here. Is September going to be bad for Bitcoin? Just boom. Is it going to be bad for Bitcoin? Because that is, I've seen almost nobody, even the most optimistic of people on social media, are pretty pessimistic about September. So I'd be interested to see, you know, what we tend to have, you know, a group of people that are pretty knowledgeable about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners here. So I would be interested to see what this group thinks. George, what's the month of September, George? You optimistic, pessimistic? Is this going to be a bad month?
I mean, define your definition of bad.
You know, are we going to break down? Are we going to retest the bottom or break below the bottom of our price range here?
Hang on, I can give you an answer in a second.
And from most,
I can't give you that answer right this minute.
Okay.
Hang on. No, I'll tell you why. I mean, I don't think short term it's going to be bad, but there's this thing that happens every month, and I want to see when it's going to happen in September. That's why I can't give you an answer like ASAP.
All right.
Well, I gotta look it up.
You look.
I got.
You look
get
that
my
up.
Dates.
So I would say bad would be breaking out of the bottom side of this range, setting a new lower low. And you can see we've had 3 big candle wicks to the downside. And actually, if I go to my other chart, I have lines on these. So the first one was back here. We candle wick down to 56.5. That was a low. Then, you know, over a month later, we candle wick down to 53.5. That was a new lower low. And then at the beginning of August, we candle wicked under 49,000 for a new lower low. So, you know, if we go back to this, are we going to get below, you know, are we going to have our next lower low here? And I would note that even with these giant candle wicks down, this line has held on the 1-day time frame. So, you know, these candles that candle wicked way below the bottom of this still ran back above and closed within this range. So that is not broken. If that were to break, that to me that would be, you know, bad September.
I think that based on those definitions, yes, we will have a bad September.
So you think we're going to get a lower low in September?
But I don't think it's coming as quickly as everybody seems to think it's coming. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I don't think it's happening next week.
So you don't think it's going to be the first week in September. You just think by the time September is said and done, it's not going to be good.
Right.
Sarmon Gaming said September will be bad. October we will pump. November will dump all the gains. So
yeah.
You know, and that's other than the November piece is a little different, but right now, I would say right now, conventional wisdom is September is going to be bad And somewhere between October and November, we're going to start to get the bull run for Bitcoin is going to be on. That's the prevailing wisdom.
Brown said this: I can't say if September will be bad because of the definition of good has been butchered. And that is probably the most accurate answer you could possibly give.
Well,
McNally said the last quarter should be positive.
Oh, hello, McNally. Welcome.
He wants to have you on his channel or something like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for mentioning that. To McNally's point, the last quarter should be positive. I think that's conventional wisdom. I feel the same way. I think the only difference for me is I don't have this pending doom feeling about September. So I agree on the fourth quarter. You know, if we look historically at the last Bitcoin cycles, particularly the last Bitcoin cycle, right? We started to take off October, November, December. That was the first leg up, and then, it continued from there all the way through March. We got to like 64,000. Then we had a huge correction over 50%, and then we topped out in November at 69,000. So, if that were to be the same thing, it would be somewhere around, November of next year before this bull run was all the way over with whatever, if it was to exactly mirror. And I'm not counting, none of us should count on these things, exactly mirroring, but they've all been fairly similar.
Have you changed your opinion yet on your price point of the bull, where we're going to end up with Bitcoin?
I have not. I have not changed my opinion. I still think we're headed to the same place. I think there's underneath. I do suspect, I do have a new thing that I suspect that you've talked about many times. And that is, as I start to see the Morgan Stanleys of the world and Goldman Sachs and some other gigantic money managers they're only now, some of them just this week put out, memos that they're starting to push the Bitcoin ETFs to their customers. So, George has long since said they're going to push this down for as long as they can so their customers can get in, at a good price. And then the run is going to happen. So, is that one of the reasons that we're still sideways? Is that one of the reasons why people may be pessimistic that there's a little more sideways or downward pressure to come? I don't know. But the flip side of that equation is, zooming out, thinking big picture, more long term, if, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Vanguard, I think, has yet to act. There's $10 trillion on the sideline. As all this money keeps coming in to Bitcoin, that's all long-term bullish. So that's still all, the majority of that is still ahead, not behind. So it just makes sense to me that this cycle shouldn't be worse, than previous cycles or, not exist at all. So I think adoption continues. I think we're in a very negative sentiment period of time right now. And there's no doubt. And it keeps getting bigger and bigger.
What's funny is I'm reading everybody. Andrew just said it, talking about covered calls. And I can tell you one thing is when it takes off, guys, you don't want to be on the wrong side of a covered call. I did a covered call with CleanSpark, and I think I got out at like 34,000. And at one point in time, I was up like 150,000. And and then I went down. Sorry, I was down 150,000. And I'm telling you what, man, you wake up real quick.
It was
now my trading account isn't even enough that I could do this, Tom. Remember that's what we were at freaking oh my goodness. This has been a long journey, Tom.
What the interesting thing about those covered calls were, and they were a nightmare. George he'd held CleanSpark, and he bought some covered calls out of the money, and it just so happened to be right before CleanSpark went ballistic. But if you remember, George, by the time
I remember.
By the time, if you had done nothing,
I would have made the money.
On a pullback, so George did buy them back and not at the peak. So, they had pulled way back off of the peak. So he bought them back to mitigate his losses. But ultimately, they came all the way back in that period of time because there was some time left on the calls. But it's terrifying. So,
Yeah, no, I trust me, dude. I mean, I that wasn't the first week I did it. I was doing it. Remember, I was doing it every single week and I was winning every single week. I didn't lose. So like I said, oh, this is ridiculous. I'm going to go all my shares. And that was the week I lost.
The hard part about
they know.
The hard part about covered calls on the Bitcoin miners or even on, Bitcoin or, a BitO or BitX or any of those. The hard part is the volatility is so massive that, you can get caught. And, a lot of people, if you sell a covered call, let's say Cleanspark's trading for $10. Well, you can say, all right, I'll sell a covered call at $12. That's 20% out of the money, is in some short period of time. And then what you can do is buy one back, maybe 30 or 40% out of the money just to protect yourself. But the thing is, the premiums are so huge on these that
I know
you might as well just not do it at all. And, not financial advice. Obviously, there are a lot of people that make money on covered calls. But, and if you do nothing on a covered call, you still make money. You make the money that you got selling the call. But you got to let your stock go, right? Because if it's in the money, they're going to buy your stock. So, George didn't want to do that.
And I didn't want to do that and it's like you said, it's like a lesson learned. I'm just letting everybody know that, you can think you're doing everything right week after week after week. And because it's Bitcoin, let's be honest, nobody knows what's going to happen next week. We're only, none of this is financial advice. We hope it goes up, but it could go down too. But, it's just all of a sudden somebody announces a stupid deal and then bam, it's on,
Right. And the same thing, I see somebody talking about a wheel strategy and, selling puts. But, you sell puts and then there's a flash crash. And now, now you're not covered. You're losing big bucks. So.
And and at the time we had a strategy on it. I mean, I wasn't naked completely.
You chose to unwind that and take some loss on it. You didn't have to do that. And
Tom, what's so crazy is to see how low my account is now. And that's the reason, I'm mainly out of the market, just a little bit in. And that's the reason why I'm taking the loss to offset. But to think about it, I mean, Tom, we're talking crazy dollars. It's insane to think how much they're beating this up.
Yeah, this has been a brutal run, and I'll go there next. What the Bitcoin miners have done so far year to date is an ugly picture. Just as I'm going to end this current poll, is September going to be bad for Bitcoin? So this is almost 50-50. 46% say yes, 54% say no. So we're pretty split on what's going to go on in September. And I think that's indicative of the fact that here we are stuck in the middle of a trading range. So, sitting in the middle, is it going to go up or is it going to go down? It's very, very hard to tell.
It's hard to. Hey, Andrew, thanks for saying you love the show. We really appreciate that. And do me a favor, like the stream. And Tom and I really enjoy doing it. It's just, it's been getting beat up hard lately because of the way the market's been.
This has been a very long, hard run for not just Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's been sideways for coming up on 6 months, but we're going to go next to what the Bitcoin miners have done. And those of us who have been buying and holding, it's exhausting. And I know a lot of people have disappeared. Given up is the wrong word, taken break. There were people, 3-4 months ago saying, you know what, I'm out. I'll be back in September, October, or whatever. And you know what? For those people, if they did that, it ended up working out for them. But I'm always afraid trying to time things, that's a different world. So I'm in it till the end of the win it. That's right. I'm in it to the end of the bull run. If I'm wrong and there is no bull run, well, then I'm wrong. There's no risk-free investing. If somebody finds that, let us know. But
And Tom, before you switch over, I got to tell you a little story real quick. And it's going to be just 30 seconds.
Sure, absolutely.
I was out with somebody, and he had a friend. I started talking to him, and of course, what do I talk about? I talk about crypto. That's what I always talk about. And I started talking about Bitcoin, and it's just amazing how many people don't understand how much trouble the fiat currency's in, number one, and number two, how Bitcoin is used. And the thing was, he's like, you just need to find a bigger fool to sell it to for more money, and you're due fine. And my wife says to me, you realize I shouldn't say this. She goes, she heard the whole conversation. She goes, why didn't you tell him you make more in a day than he probably makes in his year?
Well, because that is not the polite thing to tell somebody. That's why.
He's like, this shit, she's like, I've been with you when you went make X number of dollars. And she goes, it's like, it's insane. But that's why we're in this. That's why we're in this, Tom. That's why we're in these miners. Because, we can have just some unbelievable days. And we know they're coming.
We've seen them, right? Even inside of this awfulness, there have been, unbelievable green days inside of this. But, if you're buying and holding, if you're doing some swing trading and that kind of stuff, I'm sure there's some people in here that are way up. There's some people that are down, and, everything in between, depending on what your strategy is. I have always told you guys I'm predominantly buy and hold. So I'm holding these things and I'm waiting, and it has not paid off over the last 5 months. Quite the opposite. So, and I've dollar cost averaged just about as much as I'm going to. I will only dollar cost average if we break into. So if we're still inside of this trading range, I'm not buying. But if we hit the bottom, I'll buy. If we break out of the bottom, I'll buy. And, that's it. Otherwise, I would like my positions to be full. I've been saying that for, even going into this peak here, I was pretty much full. Now I do options, sometimes very short term, sometimes, 1 week, 1 month, 3 months. And I'll, on a much smaller scale, I do some of that, but, I don't encourage that unless you're familiar with options and you have experience in options, and if you don't, then I would just recommend, go very, very, very slowly and, crawl before you walk and walk before you run is what I like to say about options.
I got really good news today from Charles Schwab. They did a new accounting system so they can show you what you made each month. And I made $777 so far this year. So
with all the ups and all the downs and the gigantic gains and gigantic losses, it's all been a great big washout.
Yep. So I'm basically right where I started at the beginning of the year. It's like, and it seems like it was a lot of work to get there.
Yeah, it's a lot of mental anguish to end up in the same place. Crypto Fever said, I appreciate all the bears. You will get wrecked royally. Thank you ahead of time. So I hope you are right. This pattern that we're looking at is all too familiar. This is how previous Bitcoin halvings have gone. Having said that, it's still unbelievably difficult to go through. It just doesn't feel that way. And, for 1,000 reasons, you think this time's going to be different than the previous times. And even if you don't, there's so much FUD out there. First, let me go to the chart and show you what the Bitcoin miners have done. Then I want to go to an article. The ultimate, it's the ultimate FUD article. It's like, there's so much noise out there. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Let me first get to Ricky, who's been a member for 17 months. Thank you very much, Ricky. Love the stream, guys, but I'd love to have you chat in the members Discord more often. Maybe post trade ideas on your first thoughts on minor updates. So, I can do that. I'm always hesitant to tell people and I trade small with options, but, I'm wrong just as often as I'm right. And a part of just I just feel, I hear what you're saying. So, and George, you've been much more active over time in the Discord than I have, but
right now I'm trying not to think too much of crypto because I always get suckered. You know what I mean? Like I bought in at 61.2. We thought, remember, you and I were talking, and we thought the trading range was going to be from 62 to maybe 70, and that didn't hold. But I realized the reason that didn't hold is because everybody's waiting for the September 3rd before we're going to get a decent pump.
Yeah, I put some. So I put some options on, and so far that trade has been a fail. In fact, I stopped out of it because it went below where I thought it was going to go, and it was right where George is talking around, somewhere around 62,000, 61,800. It looked to me like there was some support there, and on the 4-hour time frame, that looked like it was setting up, but literally on our members only live stream, that trade was breaking during the stream. By the end of the stream, it was pretty much broken, and that was that. And Crypto Fever said, you don't trade Bitcoin, you hodl Bitcoin.
I've had really good success trading Bitcoin. So I don't know if it's been lucky, and you know what I mean, but it's like, and I understand crypto. I could get on the wrong side of that and it could just keep on going.
The fear, and some of the times you buy back in, you just straight up, we talk about it. You're like, I just don't want to miss it. I'm getting back in. And
I agree with you, Ricky. I miss that too. I unfortunately went to New York for the summer, and I don't have a computer up here. I thought I was coming up for 3 weeks, and I think I've been here, 2.5 months?
Yeah, that trip turned out to be a lot longer than you thought.
My jet broke down, guys, and I got stuck up here. Joking about the jet. But I did get stuck up here, and I'm finally going home tomorrow. Well, I don't know where home is, but I'm going to Atlanta, and then I'll end up in Naples probably in 2 weeks.
We'll believe it when we see it. You go when you go.
Right, exactly.
And Ethan,
we go when we go.
Ethan, you're welcome. I just want to mention, he said, I appreciate the honesty in admitting your losses, Tom. I went through that trade, and I think it's important to be honest, because for all these people who talk about their gains and their wins, and and George is the same way. He shares his gain, he shares his wins, he shares his losses, and this is a part of the deal. So, and
no one's perfect.
No one's perfect, and if people are representing that, then if you're at home sitting there thinking to yourself, man, why are some of my trades losing? It's because that's how it works for everybody. So. We're all
not everybody.
Well,
that's how it works for non-hedge fund owners.
Yeah, that's how it works for us retail investors. We win some and we lose some. We hope to win more than we lose. I try to stop out of the trades that are going the wrong way to mitigate some of my losses. Sometimes that even backfires because you stop yourself out, and you know what? It was just a flash crash to the downside, and your trade would have worked. So, it's hard. That's why, for the most part, I'm just holding. So the stocks themselves, so all of that I do with options. The stocks themselves, I'm just going to hold. And if, I've said it 1,000 times, I have a price target for Bitcoin, over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's my thesis. I've chosen the Bitcoin miners that I think have the highest probability of being the biggest winners, or the highest certainty level. And, all of that, only time's going to tell if we're right or we're wrong. But I have not lost any conviction in this bull market from a zooming out standpoint. So let's look at, if we look at, this is year to date, this is updated as of the end of today. So here's year to date. We are now 8 months into this year. You've got two that are doing very well. So let's start with the winners. First of all, you got Bitcoin that's now up 40% on the year. It's way off of its highs, right? It was up to almost $74,000, but still, even with this 6 months sideways, and all of this was in the first few months, it's up 40%. You've got two Bitcoin miners outperforming that. Core Scientific and TerraWolf. TerraWolf was the outperformer on the day today. It's the outperformer on the year. You've got Iris Energy in the green. And for the first time this year, you have CleanSpark in the red. For the first 5.5 months of this year, CleanSpark was so far ahead of these other 11 Bitcoin miners. They were 50% ahead of the next closest Bitcoin miner. So there has been a big reversal of that. And now for the first time, they're actually in the red year to date. So CleanSpark is down on the year. Now, fortunately, it's still up drastically. I'm going to go to that chart because, if you're depending on when you bought into CleanSpark, I'm going to go to the 1 week so you can really see. So if you were buying through the crypto winter, I got a line down here to $1.74, right? Even this line, this was December of 2022, even from May, so 5 months later, it was $3, and November of 2023 was still bouncing off the low $3 range. So, if you were accumulating in this period of time, it's a bummer that we're down to $10 and change, and we're now red for the year, but, we're still off of its lows. It's still up 500%. Now, unless you are super lucky, there's probably none of us that bought 100% of our CleanSpark right here on that day. But if you dollar cost averaged in, CleanSpark is still the one I'm up by far the most on. It's not even close. Even though it's, gone the wrong direction for me, since this high back in March, it is down.
Tom, when will you change? When would you start to think about changing your thesis on the Bitcoin miners if they try to raise more money like CleanSpark, Riot, and Marathon?
I would have to see something specifically break. I'll give you an example, and it didn't. What I'm looking for is we get monthly operational updates from all these Bitcoin miners. Obviously, we get quarterly results. So, you got to dig into the quarterly results, listen to the earning call, go through the financial statements. There is information in there that goes well beyond the information we get on a monthly basis. But of all the industries I've ever invested in, these monthly operational reports from the Bitcoin miners really allow you to keep your pulse on what is going on, in a much shorter time frame. So if I see multiple months in a row where a Bitcoin miner isn't doing what they said they were going to do, that would be a reason for me to start to worry. And that happened to me with one of my larger holdings. And if I go back to this chart, one of my top holdings is Riot. Now, a lot of the ones that I hold that I've invested a lot less money in, like, Iron is up 11% on the year. My Iron position is now bigger than my Riot position, even though I invested a lot more in Riot. Riot is down 51% this year. Riot's been a disaster from a stock standpoint. Not 90-ish days ago, or maybe 80 days ago, I said, I'm putting Riot, for me personally, just me personally, to your point, George, it was a period of time where they said they were going to do a bunch of things. So I said, over the next 90 days, if I don't see them doing a good portion of the things that they said they were going to do, I'm going to consider changing my opinion on Riot. But they have done what they said they were going to do. Now, not to perfection, not 100%, and there's still a bunch of stuff I'd like to see them do better. But they are in general doing what I think they should be doing. My personal opinion, the last dollar cost averaging I did was into Riot. So even after I was done, when Riot dipped again, and this was several weeks ago, this was the day of the flash crash, so that's almost a month ago, I bought some more Riot and I bought some more BitX. And, those were the two to me. And it could have been any of these, right? Everything really got beat up that day. But I still believe Riot's going to get where they're going. They're financially very strong. They're improving on their operations. They still have a long way to go. There's a checklist of stuff that I could tell you that, I'd like to see Riot get better at this. But they went from 12.4 exahash to, 22 or 23 exahash. Now, operationally, they only have 15 or 16 of that up. and hashing in the previous month, but they've dramatically increased the number of Bitcoin that they mine per month over the last couple of months in a row. So I saw the things that I was hoping to see. Again, not to perfection, but if I hadn't, if for instance Riot was still at 12.4 exahash right now, giving excuses and reasons as to why they're about to get their stuff online, but it's still not online, that may have been enough to make me change my mind. But for as long as they're doing, these companies have been pretty crystal clear about laying out a plan of what they expect to do in 2024 and 2025. So, you've got a gauge and a benchmark. So that's what it would take for me to change my mind. Or, if something dramatic was to happen with Bitcoin, from a regulations or some other, and I don't foresee any of those types of things. So that's what it would take for somebody to fall. But CleanSpark hasn't fallen off their plan. I think they implemented earlier than everyone else. They added a lot of exahash in January, February, March before the halving. That allowed them to hodl massive amounts of Bitcoin, more than they otherwise would have. So they ran up quickly, and now, they're getting beat up. So I still think most of the stocks on this list, we pared this list down from 19 down to 12. So by popular demand, and we did several votes on this, there's 7 Bitcoin miners that are so small, and there's more beyond that. There's 3 or 4 or 5 that I was never following that, most of these companies, other than 2 of them, Hive and BitDigital, are not billion-dollar market cap companies. They're hovering around $400 or $500 million, maybe a little less than that. All the rest of these are billion-dollar plus market caps. The ones that we ditched were mostly less than 100 million. So, that's 1/10 or 1/15 or 1/20th the size of the rest of these. So these are the big 12. And I expect most of these are going to go up when Bitcoin does its thing. If Bitcoin does its thing, I think that the miners are going to participate. In the past, even the miners that, aren't doing well have huge run-ups when Bitcoin takes its big runs. So we'll see if that's changed. And I see Robin saying, I'm not worried about Riot anymore. So me neither, Robin. So I agree. Go ahead, George.
Few questions. Are you still bullish on miners? That was from Brent.
I am still bullish on miners, yes, but I do think, and I've been talking about this for a while, I think they're going to for as long as we're stuck in this range, and I'll go back to this chart.
This is why I think next week's going to be a pump, by the way, because everybody feels burnt out right now.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, that's what we talked about. The contrarian trade is often correct. For me, until Bitcoin breaks out, the first thing we got to do is break out of the top of this trading range that we're in. But I think beyond that, we need to get past this new all-time high that we set back in March, which was around 73,800. So I think if we can break out of that range, push towards 80, I think that's when you're going to see the Bitcoin miners have massive moves to the upside, in my opinion. So when Bitcoin hits 70,000, 75,000, 80,000, 85,000, then you're really, in my opinion, you're going to start to see big moves, and you're going to start to see the Bitcoin miners move at a much faster pace than Bitcoin's moving at. But it's going to take, there's this, $10,000 or $15,000 in between potentially, where the miners are kind of been stuck. I mean, if we go back and look, most of these are red. So as we trade up and down inside of this range, these haven't, other than these two, the miners really haven't taken off yet. And I just don't think they're going to until after Bitcoin takes that next leg up. So for as long as we're stuck with Bitcoin, I think we're even more stuck with the Bitcoin miners. But I am not going to try and time it. I'm not going to get rid of them and hope to buy them lower. And, I've waited too long. I'm not going to ditch them now and miss.
So I'm sorry if I'm missing everybody's questions. I'm sorry about that. But anyways, any news on the merger between Bitfarms and Stronghold, and any other news of any other mergers that you're hearing?
On the merger front, I've heard nothing else. So no new filing this week. the last filing we got between Riot and Bitfarms, Riot owned 19.9% of the stock in Bitfarms. So that is probably temporarily where they're going to stop. So this is the first week where they didn't do an SEC filing to update the amount that they own. So, I think they got to 19.9. They're going to hang there. We'll see what happens next. So really no news on the Riot Bitfarms front. And on Bitfarms, has made an offer, and the deal's not closed, but they are going to buy Stronghold. So George is questioning, we'll see. Time will tell if and when that deal closes. Is that a good deal? Is that a bad deal? The more I dig into it, I have some optimism about that deal, and I have massive optimism about Bitfarms. Please, not financial advice. That's my conviction. It hasn't changed. I went all through everything again with Bitfarms, and I just feel like it's being beaten down for a couple of different reasons. And George raised an interesting one. It may have been on the members only live stream. It's not a US based company. It's traded on the NASDAQ, which is a US exchange, but it's not a US based company. And so if I look at the 10 big companies, and we follow 12, 2 of them are much smaller, but they have much smaller exahash and they're smaller companies. So the 10 big ones, the 2 that have the smallest market cap are the 2 that are not US based companies. I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it's just... And if you look at them, the big institutions haven't bought into those companies. And that, could be a reason why. If you look at, if we go look at, I'll use Marathon and Riot as the most well-established on the NASDAQ for, they were both trading in the 2017 peak in the, not the last bull cycle, though even the one before that. So, those have been around a long time. So, like most companies on the NASDAQ, for Riot and Marathon, their top 1 and 2 holders are Vanguard and BlackRock. So that's not really true for a lot of the other Bitcoin miners. And it's not, for Bitfarms. If I go to Bitfarms, let's just go there. Oh, that's not the one I want to go to. If we go to...
Hit the like button. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, George. Thanks for the reminder. If you're just got here, if you have not yet, we're at 72 likes. We're shooting for 100 likes. Much appreciated if you would hit the like button. It helps out the stream in real time. And I just want to do one other thing while I'm talking about that. Okay, so if you go to institutional holders for Bitfarms, you'll see BlackRock and Vanguard aren't even on the list. So you'll see some names here. Right, Van Eck we know is they've got a Bitcoin ETF. State Street is very often the third largest holder in a lot of U.S. companies. So, and Morgan Stanley's a name we see. Susquehanna is a name we see a lot, but you don't see that adoption. Versus, so the top holder in this whole thing is 4.3%, and then it drops to 1.4% for Bitfarms. And if you go look at Marathon, and that's kind of whether you like them or hate them, they're the biggest market cap by far. They're the big dog. If I look at the same, not options. If I look at the same list, BlackRock has almost 15%, Vanguard 11%. So that's 25% of the shares that a company like Bitfarms is missing. These buyers aren't there. So, to your point, George, right, that's massive buying pressure that just isn't there for a company like Bitfarms yet. Is it coming? I don't know.
So here's a little theory, though. It just put it together as you were talking. Can you imagine, though, is if they become a US based company and then Riot sells everything?
So, right. And so here to go to your point, George.
You ever think that these guys might be working together, Tom? Sorry.
Well, stranger things have happened. If they are, they'll never admit it. They can't.
No, they can't. They can't.
I'm going right to your point. Hut 8 is a company that was a Canadian company. So the Canadian companies that in 2021, Hut, Hive, Bitfarms, and who am I forgetting? The little one, DigiHost. Those 4 Canadian companies listed themselves on the NASDAQ in 2021. Well, subsequent to that, Hut did their merger of equals and had New Hut, so still trading under Hut, ticker, new company, but it's a U.S. company. So now look at what happened to Hut, George. Number 1 shareholder, BlackRock, just under 7%. Number 2, Vanguard, 6%. Yep. So this really goes to your argument. Hut changed to a U.S. company, and that's, 13%. That's a big deal.
But the only thing bad about those guys, those bastards, is they're going to beat the price up to get in at a really good entry point.
So you're saying if they're not in yet and they want to get in, they're going to punish it to get in.
Yep. You know it. And they're very good at it too.
Well, and they're all, in my opinion, they're already very punished. That's just my opinion.
Right. Do you think the election, and it's kind of interesting that the halving is always with the presidential U.S. election. I thought about that. That's kind of weird. I was like, why wouldn't they have done it? I think it's just because it's just another distraction for the election season. Do you think that is suppressing the price of Bitcoin at all, or the crypto?
I would answer that is possible, because I do find in election years in the different businesses that I've participated in, a lot of people, especially, on larger purchases, so I don't know if, I don't know how cryptocurrency and Bitcoin falls into this, but an election is uncertainty. And what's the one thing the market deplores is uncertainty. So a lot of times, regardless of what the outcome of an election is, it does free up a lot of money. People will start to make their buying decisions after that uncertainty has passed. Even if it didn't go the way they wanted it to go, the uncertainty's gone and the money starts to flow in. And I've seen that happen historically more often than not, and I'm talking about larger things, for me, house, buying a new building a new house, remodeling, buying a new house, buying a car, those big buying decisions. But, the same thing might be playing into this. We did see in the last cycle, Bitcoin start to pump before the election 4 years ago, just a little bit before. So I don't know. I do have a couple of, and we won't get too political here, but we've got, we just usually pop in and take a look at this. This is Polymarket, so I am not encouraging this or recommending it or endorsing this in any way, shape, or form, but this is a crypto, basically betting website. So people are betting on who's going to win the election. So this is where this sits. This has been all over the place, just so that everybody knows. So I wouldn't lend too much credence to this. There have been wild swings. It does seem to have settled down the last 3 or 4 days to within about 1% of this. But this is just for fun. This is out there. This is what this is saying. And I mean, conventional wisdom, whatever your politics are, conventional wisdom. I mean, Donald Trump showed up to and spoke at the Bitcoin conference. An article came out today. He's got a DeFi platform that they're looking to launch. And, he's said very, very, very bullish things about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. There is an underlying reason that he has mentioned that I think is the biggest factor, which is he is against a CBDC. He does not want a digital dollar. So he does think that, Bitcoin is the thing that will prevent that. I think we are years or never away from a digital dollar. Jerome Powell has said he's not doing it unless Congress passes an act, and I don't see Congress doing that anytime soon, if ever. The president's not going to do that by executive order. So I don't think that's totally separate conversation. I just don't think that's happening yet. I can't sit here and say that will never happen. Let's do a poll.
As he does that poll, I'm just going to say a few little things. Hey, if you guys just write a comment and you don't put a question, I don't usually read it on air, or Tom won't read it unless he's got like a few seconds or a few minutes. But if you write a question, we'll try to always answer the questions. But as you do that poll, Tom, please do me a favor and hit the like button so we can get to 100. We used to get 500. Then Bitcoin went into this accumulation period. It's not been fun. But Edmund said we're still in crypto summer and accumulation period. Crypto fall fireworks should start late September, October. And Iris, being an Australian company, what do you think about that, Tom? Do they have BlackRock?
That's a great question. Let's take a look at that. So let me put this poll up, and then we'll take a look at that. Very good question. Will the USA have a digital dollar in the next 2 years? So over the next couple of years, we're going to get a digital dollar. Let's go take a look at
CleanSpark to 50. CleanSpark to 50. Were you CleanSpark to 100 before? Question mark. Where we have a digital dollar in the next 2 years.
Listen, I'll take 50.
I have a question. Are you just saying plus the regular dollar and a digital dollar?
Yeah, that doesn't mean the regular dollar will go away, although the plan of a digital dollar would ultimately be to eliminate cash, et cetera, and, whatever theory or conspiracy theory you want to go beyond that. But the step one would have to be, is there going to be a digital dollar? They can't eliminate the regular dollar until they...
I said yes, especially in 2 years.
So this is interesting because no, BlackRock and Vanguard are not in Iris Energy or IREN. I don't think they want to be called Iris Energy anymore. They said that in their press release. They're now IREN. But no, they do have a few decent sized holders. Here's Morgan Stanley at 2.9%. So there's a lot of money yet to move into this. And this has run. Now, it's way off of its highs. This got up over $15. So if we go to IREN's chart, and you can see, just to finish the last conversation, CleanSpark is 57% off of its highs from March. And I think we're going to see IREN is 50% off of its highs from July. So this is August. So that was a quick and painful, but the flip side of that is, once again, I mean, if you were accumulating, if you had a long time to accumulate here, and if you were doing that, then, from the bottom, this is still up 667%. Even from this level of support that it found, which you could have bought it in November of 2020, but pretty much all of 2023. So even from there, it's still up, 185%. So, depending on when you bought IREN, I sold IREN and then rebought it. So I did accumulate over here. I sold it over here when they announced they were going to have a $500 million at the market offering as a $250 million market cap company. That scared me out of the stock. I was able to buy back in when I saw things progressing. And their most recent report I'm going to talk about, because they did just report, and there's some big information in there. I am impressed with what they've done. There's some things that I love that they've done. And there's still one strange question mark to me, and it's really, George, your big issue. They do not hodl Bitcoin, and it would appear they have no intention of ever hodling Bitcoin. And it more and more looks like, and they've talked about this, they consider themselves a data center company first. So that's crazy. Let's go to Let's go to iron.
80-20. Oh, no.
So if you look, this is what's going on. So in January of 2023, they were at 1.7 exahash. So, that's a long time ago. That's a year and a half ago. But look at the growth they've had. From 1.7 to the end of the year, 5.6. They now just announced new 10.5 exahash purchase of S21 XP miners improves efficiency to 15 joules. Okay, so that's separate. Rapid growth to 30 exahash over the next 4 months. But what they announced in their earnings is that they're already at 15 exahash. So, they went from December of 2023 to August of 2024 from 5.6 to 15 exahash. And they said by the end of next month, they will be at 20 exahash, which they're showing in this chart. So they're going to go from in 9 or 10 months from 5.6 exahash to 20 exahash. That is incredible growth. They've already got things in order to get to 30 by the end of the year. They've talked about getting to 40 next year, but they're showing they have the space to get to 50. So, this is from their investor presentation that they just put out. And you can see efficiency-wise, they were at 30 joules per terahash. And if you remember, back in January of 2023, even the latest and greatest S19 version, was up in, actually the S19 XP whatevers were closer to this, but now the S21 XPs, I think it is, are at 15 joules per terahash. So they're saying their whole fleet is going to be at 17 joules per terahash next month. That will be the lowest anybody's reported by far. And then 15 by the end of the year. There are 2 or 3 companies that are starting to say they're going to try and get their entire fleet at or near 15 joules per terahash. The only way to do that is to have basically replaced your whole fleet with the latest and greatest miner in order to accomplish this. But, this is some of the good stuff. There was a lot of big information in this report. But one thing that I would say, if I can, let me find this. I'm going to flip through this, if you don't mind, for 30 seconds. I'm looking for something in specific. Okay, so in order to do all this wonderful stuff that they did is the other side of the conversation. First, let me get to Calvin. Sorry, I'll get right back to this in 1 second. Calvin, who's been a member for 13 months. Tom, which miners have you invested? Oh, which miners have you invited to the channel? When can your audience expect an interview? We've had polls about this. What's the status? So I have not invited anybody on to talk for a little while. A lot of these guys are giving a lot of interviews, and I'm not sure how much more me asking them all the same questions has to offer. So, but I would say I would like to have Ben on the channel. Would be my number 1 pick. So you can drop in the comments what your number 1 pick would be. I just think they've got the most going on. And again, one of my frustrations with these interviews are they can't answer 75% of the questions that you ask. But, sometimes we have gotten bits of information.
Yeah, but here's the other problem, Tom. They killed the views. The views were killed. They were awful, the views.
Yes.
What I mean? That was the biggest problem. The biggest problem is you can't have, these videos, unfortunately, YouTube, monetizes everything you try to do, right? And if you go and interview somebody like Jason at Riot, that was actually over time it turned out to be okay, but in the period of time, the first 30 days, it wasn't very good.
Right, and a lot of people have lost interest, but it doesn't mean so. That's a yes, and that was one of our that was one of our processes, and the other one is we've got some other people in the space that are talking to everybody on such a regular basis. But I understand, and it sounds like a lot of people are saying they do want some more of these interviews. And I know we have mentioned this a couple of times in the past. It's just I have been hesitant to do some things in this massive sideways period of time when interest has dropped off a cliff. So
Kelvin, in the general in YouTube, if it's released to, like, for an example, if it's released to the members, it's a different number of views versus if it's released to the general public. If the general public doesn't want to see a video, why would you waste your time and energy to do it? There's a cost associated to everything we do. And I know you don't realize that, or maybe you do. And, you know, it just, the cost wasn't warranted for the amount of people watching it. It just, that's the fact, Jack. You know what I mean?
So Pogo's saying, yes, please. Yeah, I mean, a part of this is...
Yeah,
there's an awful lot of time, effort, and energy. I mean, we're a tiny channel, and these interviews take a lot more time. And you know, I tend to.
And I'm going to tell you something. The one that sticks out in my mind is that effing Fred.
I knew you were going to bring that one up.
That guy set us up, and he could have waited one extra day, and he set us up just to pound everybody in the ass. I'm sorry, guys.
Ouch. In the bleep.
That's what he
I don't have a bleep button.
Me off.
Well, yeah, I know. He said nothing, and then they came out and did something dramatic, like one day later.
And it was like, you mother hucker. You could have made us look like heroes. Instead, you made us look like zeros.
But this is the problem. They can't say anything. So you ask questions, and they can't answer.
No,
not for the members saying,
well,
Pogo is saying, I get it. Other channels do it. You're still my number one. So thank you, Pogo. And, you know, I mean, it's hard. There was a time where we were the only ones doing this and we were the only way to talk. But there's some channels that are pretty much just dedicated to talking to these guys every single week. So, you know, my extra thing, I hear it's frustrating some people that I haven't done that. So I'm not disregarding that. I don't want to spend, you know, everybody else's time talking about that because nobody really wants to hear this conversation. But I do.
Didn't you feel like that was with? And I know what you're gonna say, but because Tom he's the most neutral person you'll ever meet. You know, didn't you feel like Frank set us up?
Fred.
Frank.
Here's the thing. What they did is they did that. Remember, they converted all that debt like the day after they talked to us. But here's the thing.
Right.
They can't go on our channel and go, hey, by the way, you know, we're about to convert $390 million of debt tomorrow. They just can't do it.
He could say this. Here's what he could say. Just, you might want to give it one day before you put this video up. Totally legal to do.
Well, he could have deferred. I mean, he could have not disclosed the reason, but said, I can't do an interview until such and such a date.
Exactly. And
yes.
And here, if you remember, he rescheduled that 2 or 3 times. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
He rescheduled that 2 or 3 times. I'm sorry. He knew what he was doing. Most of the CEOs could care less about the retail investors, and we all know that. That's why I feel that they're a waste of time. Sorry.
All right. People are saying, carry on. Let's move on with our lives.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That just bothered me. Fred, Frank, whatever his name is at Marathon. See, I don't care. Bye.
Okay. So,
Tom, we want to hear behind the scenes. We probably should do a channel like that.
Well, our members only, we definitely talk about a lot more on our members only streams than we do on the live streams. There's certain things where our live streams would just get cut if we were talking about. And Ethan's saying he doesn't care about the interviews.
By the way, it already does get, dude. So we do a TikTok channel.
Since we've been talking about whether or not we're going to do interviews, we've lost half of our audience on this live stream.
Just there you go. Prime example. There you go.
So back to, in other news, we were talking about iron. And we just talked about the monumental amounts of growth that they've had, but it is noteworthy. And they did tell us they did 2 $500 million at the market offerings. But if you look at this, total equity increased to $1 billion, $1.097 billion. But with gross proceeds of $822.9 million, 121 million shares. So they issued 121 million shares under their ATM and ELOC And they only had, I think, so they have a total of 189 million shares, 121 million of which have been issued this year. So that's dilution, right? That's more than doubling the amount of shares that they have. Now, okay, the question is, what'd you get for it? And this has been a gigantic topic. Are we getting, is all this dilution worth it? So what we got for it, if I go back to this other page that we started on, right, we went from 5.6 exahash to 20 exahash at the end of next month. So I would say we got what we paid for, or they got what they paid for. And, as an investor, I'm totally satisfied with this. I'm going to do a deep dive on Iron. And, I've done in the deep dive myself. I just need to create the video on it. I thought there was some big stuff in this report, and they have big plans in the future. They've already executed a lot of their plans, and their stock is down 50% off of its highs. Now, still way up, like I said, but down off of its highs, 50% in the last, month and a half. So CleanSpark to 50 said, thank you for the super chat, by the way. CleanSpark to 50 said, with their similar growth, who's the better buy right now, CleanSpark or Iron? Market cap difference is 1.15 billion. So we'll just look at that. I'll give you my opinion. Maybe we'll close out the poll and ask people this next. But let's just take a look. So Iron is at a $1.5 billion market cap, and down quite a bit from the top. But CleanSpark was also down 55%. So they're both way off of their peak market caps. CleanSpark's at a $2.6 billion market cap. Personally, for me, I have a higher level of conviction in CleanSpark. And one of the big differences is CleanSpark has 7,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And they continue to hodl their Bitcoin. They're hodling 99% of the Bitcoin that they mine each month. They have not stated that that's a forever policy. That's just what they have been doing for really almost a year now. They went from, during the crypto winter, they had about 500 Bitcoin on their balance sheet for like a year. And then they did make a conscious decision. They said, we're going to start hodling and compiling Bitcoin. So they've gone from 500 Bitcoin to 7,000 Bitcoin. And, they mine, I think the second most, let's take a look at the chart. We'll go to this one. So you can see CleanSpark mines the second most amount of Bitcoin per month. Marathon at 692 in July, CleanSpark at 494. And that's a big difference. But then, a fairly big drop off to third place at Core Scientific. Now, if Iron did what they said they're going to do, their number should jump quite a bit, but we will see. It will be interesting because CleanSpark was at 21.2 exahash. Iron is saying they're going to get to 20 exahash. So let's see in September if, can they more than double their output? They're going to double their exahash, and they've already gone to 15. So, is Iron going to move up into this third place spot on the number of Bitcoin mined? So that would put CleanSpark and Iron, potentially close here. The difference being, from a balance sheet standpoint, that's 7,000 Bitcoin. To me, I still believe Bitcoin's going to make a huge run. So I think CleanSpark's going to get a big gain on that. These are both good companies, in my opinion. They do have slightly different philosophies on how they're going to conduct business. I won't say slightly. There's another giant fundamental difference between these two companies. Iron considers them their true expertise. Obviously they're all in on Bitcoin mining, but they're also all in on high performance computing data centers. And they consider that their true expertise. And that they're looking to have that be a larger and larger portion of their overall business, not so much at the expense of their Bitcoin mining, because, they're going to go from 5 to 50 exahash if they execute their plan in 2 years. So it's not like they're neglecting their Bitcoin mining. That would make them one of the big dogs. But they have this data center piece CleanSpark believes, and they said so out loud on their conference call, they are not going to do any high performance computing. And they think they have a competitive advantage by taking all of their resources and focusing it on growing their Bitcoin mining operations. So you have one company that's 100% focused on Bitcoin and another company that's splitting their focus. Now, a lot of you might feel like splitting your focus is also creating another revenue stream, and that's going to pay off in the long term. It's two different philosophies. It's too soon to say which one's right and which one's wrong. I have a higher level of confidence in CleanSpark. I've seen them execute over a longer period of time, but both of these companies have done what they said they will do. I will say, going back a ways, and I'm not necessarily holding this against Iron, but at one point, Iron did get in over their heads, and they had to walk away from the vast majority of their fleet of Bitcoin miners in 2022. Now, to their credit, they structured their loan, and I don't know how they did this, but they had these special purpose vehicle entities that shielded Iron from all the debt that they incurred to buy these machines. So they were able to basically just hand over the keys, walk away, start over. They did, and they grew their business, multiples of what it was in the past. So despite that stumble, they're in a phenomenal place, in my opinion, right now. So I own both of those stocks. So, I'm not going to bash either one of them. And, for me, in my personal opinion, not financial advice, me personally, I have a higher level of conviction in CleanSpark than I do in Iris Energy or Iron.
Tom.
So we'll ask the people, will the US, let's close this out. Will the USA have a digital dollar in the next 2 years? 22% say yes, 78% say no. So almost your 80-20 rule, George. The people think, no, we're probably not going to have a digital dollar in the next 2 years.
I think a lot has to do with who gets into office, by the way.
Right. Well, Trump has straight out said he's completely against the digital dollar, and it's the main reason he's in favor of Bitcoin. So, I understand that, politicians say things, and some of you may take them at face value, and some of you may not. But that's what he said. And, he did go to the Bitcoin conference for whatever that's worth. It's largely perceived that Trump is pro-Bitcoin. So we'll end this poll. So I just want to go ahead, George.
You rather own Bitfarms as a miner who can buy thousands of shares or fewer shares of CleanSpark? From Robin.
Well, Bitfarms and CleanSpark are my two highest conviction plays. So this is a really hard question. So for those of you who don't know, and again, this is not financial advice. Please don't do what I do or don't do what anybody else does. Everybody, you do you. But I hold a position in Marathon, Riot, CleanSpark, Bitfarms, and Iron. I also have BitX and some options and that kind of stuff. So, the two that I've owned the longest, the one that I've owned the longest, period, is Bitfarms. And I still have an ultra high level of conviction in Bitfarms. They're the two that I'm up the most on because I dollar cost averaged into those for a longer period of time, all the way through the crypto winter. So that's a really hard decision for me. So the question is, I guess the question is, with my next dollar, would I buy CleanSpark or Bitfarms? Man, that's brutal. That's a brutal question. Probably right now, probably Bitfarms, only because I think that this situation with Riot, this pending hostile takeover, has suppressed their stock. Also, they did a lot of their growth while Bitcoin was consolidating over the last 6 months. So CleanSpark did their growth in a period of time where Bitcoin was on the run. So CleanSpark ran up big time. Bitfarms didn't get that. You can see, if you look at these columns, in June, Bitfarms mined 21% more Bitcoin than they did in May. That was a big jump. And then in July, they mined 34% more Bitcoin than they mined in June. So Bitfarms has been executing, in my opinion, at a very high level. So I'm very, very satisfied. But CleanSpark's numbers, they mined the second most amount of Bitcoin. They were up 7% month over month in June, and then 11% on top of that in July. So I like both of these companies. I probably wouldn't buy, just personally because, those are the positions I've been building out the longest. I probably won't buy any more shares of either of those. But I guess if I had to pick right now, I think maybe Bitfarms is a little better bargain than CleanSpark, in my opinion. JD saying CleanSpark and Bitfarms are my number 1 and 2. And somebody...
My problem is I'm worried about CleanSpark having to reauthorize or up their at the market offering.
Well, and I think... I think they will. And I think Bitfarms will too. I mean, these guys, if they're going to grow to where they say they're going to grow, they're going to have to go raise a lot more money, both of these companies.
Interesting.
So, all right, let's see. Let's go. First of all, let's take a quick look and see what Bitcoin is doing. So it's hovering. This gold line is where Bitcoin was when the U.S. equity markets closed yesterday. So you can see after all the ups and downs, and, one of the articles I read talked about essentially the trade the last week has been, when the Asian markets open, Bitcoin has pumped, which you see, kind of right here. And when the U.S. markets open, Bitcoin is dumped, which you kind of see right here. And that has been a reliable trade, and that will work until it doesn't work, and now that we've talked about it, it probably will never work again. So that's how that goes.
When do you think the fad for AIs will be over? And do you think it's going to be bigger than it is, or do you think is overhyped?
I had an article on that I was going to go through on here, but I closed it, and it was basically Wall Street's waking up to the fact that, AI is overbought, and, the reaction to the NVIDIA results is evidence of that. But I disagree with that. I think anybody that does anything and says AI now, NVIDIA is now a $3 trillion company. So, okay, we're not going to get 10 or 15% moves on them, maybe like we did in the past on earnings. But, they've been either the first, second, or third largest company in the world over the last 100 days, depending on the day. So, but you can see the Bitcoin miners, for the most part, when they put out press releases about, AI contracts and that kind of stuff, they get big bounces. And, smaller companies get even bigger bounces. So I think we're still pretty early on this AI stuff. One of the things the article was talking about was that, a lot of the companies aren't getting the return on their investment yet from all this money they're putting into AI, because it just hasn't gotten to where it needs to go, with only a few exceptions. And the article went on to say the one winner they think that's going to end up out of all this is NVIDIA, because that is the picks and shovel play on AI. That chip, is no one else has one. They've cornered the market.
Tom, can we play a game real quick? And that game is this. If Bitcoin reaches $150,000, where will Marathon, Riot, CleanSpark, and Bitfarm most likely be trading at stock price?
If Bitcoin reaches $150,000, so so you're talking whether that's 9 months from now, 15 months from now, whatever the case may be.
How about 4 months from now?
4 months from now?
I mean, I'm positive. You're negative.
You just went uber optimistic.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, when it's there, where do you think these guys will be at?
I mean, I think that it's not unreasonable to expect a 4x from here.
A 4x?
Right. So, Bitfarms at $2, a 4x is $8. That's a monstrous move. And this is a very hard game to play, right? But I do think
it's a game.
I think you're going to see big. I still think most of the run. I mean, you can see. Let me go back to this chart. Even a company like Bitfarms, they're down 26% this year. They're hanging around. Are they at $1 billion or did they go under?
They're under $1 billion.
So they just went under $1 billion. So, this is a company that if they do what they say they're going to do, they could be anywhere from 35 to 55 exahash a year from now. So let's say they're at 42 exahash and Bitcoin's at $150,000. Yeah, I think this could easily be an $8 stock. It could blow way by that, depending on, these are super volatile stocks, and what their fair value is and what they run to, are not the same thing. And in previous cycles, these have run, to crazy places. This was at $9 in the last cycle when they were at 2 exahash. So why wouldn't I believe it's going to get to $9 this cycle if they're at 40 exahash?
So like Marathon, you think Marathon would only 4x with the amount of Bitcoin they have holding?
Marathon's got a 5.5x just to get back to where they were in the last cycle. So yeah, Marathon could do more than that, right? I think they got to 83 back in November of 2021. And I tend to be conservative. You know what I mean? One of these could pull a 10x for all I know. And remember, the other thing is, let me just go to, I'm going to go to Marathon because it's important to remember Marathon bottomed out at $3. So if Marathon gets to $60, that's a 20x from the bottom. So now, having said that, that means it didn't even get back to where it was in the previous cycle. So I think Marathon investors would be disappointed in that. So let's just ask a poll. Let's go. Give me just a second to type this out.
Did we make it to 100, Tom? 104. Thanks,
104.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody. And if you haven't, you can smash the like button. It does help the channel out a lot. Give me one more second.
Well, hey, I'm trying to get positive because it's been a brutal week for Bitcoin. So I'm coming up with great little games. The what if game.
The what if, this is always a fun one. So what do you expect your Bitcoin miner, so meaning the Bitcoin miner you're invested in, miner or miners, what do you expect them to do at the peak of this cycle? And that's counting from their current price right now, not from their bottom. So 3x or less. Oh, that should say 4 to 5x, 6 to 7x, or 8x or more. So
Just, I put 8x.
You're expecting an 8x or more.
So I bought a whole bunch of Bitfarms. So 8 times 2 is 16. Yes.
So if I look at Marathon.
Oh, thanks, sir. That's great. We enjoyed talking about it. I didn't enjoy losing my money, Pierre.
So that would put Marathon at $133.
And that's reasonable.
If you go 16.
How much? So do me a favor. How many Bitcoin will they have by then? Let's say in 6 months.
Well, that's an unknown. I mean, they're at about 25,000 Bitcoin right now, and they've been doing convertible debt to, they bought 4,144 Bitcoin by raising money.
Take 25,000 times 150,000, and how much money is that?
And let me do this, because it's going to be, in my estimation, it'll be between 35 and 50,000 Bitcoin. So we'll go to the low end of that, 35,000.
Okay, 35,000.
35,000, and if you assume Bitcoin gets from 60 to 160,000, that's $100,000 of appreciation on 35,000 Bitcoin. That's $3.5 billion.
Right.
So that would only be, that would only not even double their market cap.
That's a double.
But that's not really the right way to look at it, because that will actually go to the way the accounting works. That would actually be net income. So now these companies aren't going to trade at 20 or 30x multiples of their net income, especially given this. It'll be much, much smaller numbers, but there will be some multiple. And remember, if there's a crypto winter, the opposite will happen. So this is why it's very, very hard. This is a fun game to play, but it's a very difficult game to play. But here's what I will say. You should be expecting some significant return, because these are highly volatile, higher risk investments. So, if they succeed, they should have a higher return. Now, if they fail at what they're doing, or Bitcoin fails at what it's doing, that's the risk. So obviously that would go the other way.
Okay, now I got another question. Would you buy, I still will always call him Iris. Would you buy Iris right now?
If I had a clean slate and I was just getting into the Bitcoin miners and building out my portfolio, if I frame it that way, because, right now I'm heavy in everything. So, but if I was starting from scratch, that would be one of the ones that I would buy. Yes. And it would help me diversify in a way, because most of the other Bitcoin miners that I'm heavy into aren't. 3 of the 5 Bitcoin miners that I'm invested in aren't really pursuing the high performance computing / AI data center business. So Iron is heavily pursuing that. They're looking for that to become a much bigger part of their business. And Bitfarms is pursuing that to a smaller extent. But Cleanspark is not, Riot is not, and Marathon is not at this point. Riot and Marathon, I don't think, have definitively said, well, actually, Marathon basically said they're not interested in that. Cleanspark definitively said, we are not doing it. And I'm not sure that Riot has given a definitive answer on that. They have an awful lot of power they have access to, so I wouldn't be shocked to see them get into that business to some extent. But if I'm going to be, heavy into this, I like to try to diversify. So that's what I've tried to do. And Cleanspark to 50 is saying Iron closed their ATM yesterday. So there you go. Well, and they've raised $822 million. Plus, I saw maybe 5 or 10 million after the period they were reporting. So it sounds like they've closed that out. But, don't be surprised, to get to where they're going, they're going to raise more money. They did have $400 million on their balance sheet at June 30th. So that was a big improvement for them. Robert Anderson.
It's crazy to see that more than, almost 75% 4x or more.
Yeah. Yeah. These should be the expectations we have. Whether they happen or not, time will tell. But, if you're going to take this risk, if everything plays out, you should get the reward.
I put my stupid dogs outside and now they're just sitting there barking. They're just going, bark.
Robert Anderson said, is Iron heavily pursuing it because they won't ever possibly use all the power for Bitcoin mining? So the answer to that is yes. They have, and it doesn't exist yet, but they have 1.4 gigawatt facility in West Texas that, doesn't even exist yet. So they're getting to their 50 exahash with none of that. So I think, yes, they have a massive amount of potential infrastructure that they plan on, using a lot of it for high performance computing. So that's 1.4 at that one facility. Let me see if I can find the exact numbers. Because
Pogo's got a question and I got to ask it because I don't know what TA stands for.
Technical analysis.
Oh, I thought it was something else.
Boy. Oh, brother. So you can see they have 350 megawatts operating and 2024 construction plus 400 megawatts. So this is, this is irrespective of where do they show. So this is 750 megawatts with before the 1.4 gigawatts that they've got in West Texas. So they have a massive amount of potential power that they have access to. And that's what a lot of these companies are doing. And that's what this dilution is all about. And that's one thing that I do think is different with the Bitcoin miners this time around. This is a maturity of this industry. None of these Bitcoin miners had even a small fraction of this amount of infrastructure built out in November of 2021 when Bitcoin peaked. These were all very tiny companies compared to what they are today from an infrastructure standpoint. And then you've got Marathon that had no infrastructure. They were asset light and all their Bitcoin miners were hosted by others. So, you've had a total reversal and now we're seeing, much, much, much bigger companies. And I think ultimately that's going to pay off for these guys, but only if Bitcoin does what it's supposed to do.
Another question, Tom. What YouTubers do you listen to for technical analysis?
Oh boy.
You don't do any, do you?
What YouTubers do I watch for technical analysis?
Yeah.
I mean, I watch a lot of YouTubers. The last 3 or 4 months, and maybe it's longer now, I've really tried to focus on watching what other people are saying just to try to understand the sentiment out there. Because, I was living in my own vacuum. I do all my own technical analysis, but yeah, I do see others. I'm trying to remember.
I gotta prop you because people don't realize stuff. Tom does not. See, here's the difference between this channel and every other channel. Tom doesn't go and listen to other people's information that's not correct on reading like a 10Q, for an example, or reading any financials that have come out. Because he has done this for so long. Who'd you do I don't know. Do you even say where you worked? Or it doesn't matter. You work for one of the big 4 accounting firms.
Right. My background is I worked for one of the big 4 accounting firms in auditing. So, so I read financial statements. I won't say for fun, but I've always, reading 10Qs, 10Ks I used to prepare them. So yes, I read them.
So for billion-dollar companies too, by the way. So here's the one thing that Tom always says. They're never right.
And that doesn't mean they're wrong.
No, but
you just need to know what to look for. And, there's a massive amount of data in a 10Q, right? Between the financial statements, the footnotes, management's discussion. I mean, there's a massive amount of data. And, I try and pour through all of it for all of these companies, which is extremely time consuming, but it's well worth it, especially since I'm putting my money in it. And like George said, that's my background. So if I'm not doing that, but in addition to that, the technical analysis side of that, the charting side, the looking at different, indicators, I do a lot of that myself as well. I don't, most technical analysis for me is for short-term trades or swing trades, or to try to understand where we are inside of a cycle. So, I don't day trade or swing trade, but I do try to look at what other people are looking at. And I'm trying to remember, I think his channel might be called Crypto World. Might be wrong.
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know who is that.
It's just somebody that does technical analysis every single day. And I can't remember most of them because, I can't watch every single one of them every single day, but I do try to tune in to some of them from time to time. And it's funny because, on any given day, if I watch 5 different technical analysis channels, you could get people saying the exact opposite thing. And that's the scary part about technical analysis or relying on any one indicator. And I've talked about this a lot on the channel. I try to look at multiple indicators pointing in the same direction. You want to get confirmation. And even once you've done all of that, it's still a gamble in the short term.
Tom, are you sure you're not talking about Wayne's World? Wayne's World, Wayne's World. Sorry.
It is not Wayne's World, although I've watched Wayne's World back in the day as well. Listen, there's some good people out there, and they're.
And I'll give props to Sebastian, because I'll tell you what, that man spends a lot of time doing his work.
Right, he does. Right, and he doesn't do exactly what I do, but he is meticulous and detailed, and puts a lot of time into that. And McNally Money, in a different way, spends a lot of time doing what he does. So, that's just inside of our tiny little universe. But inside of the Bitcoin universe, not so much the Bitcoin miners, there's thousands of channels. So, it makes me laugh because I read the headlines and you'll see one of them like, oh, you've got 24 hours left and it's too late. And then, the thumbnail right next to it is disaster pending, get out now. So that's why I try not to pay too much attention. And Clive, thank you for the super chat. Tom, I know you also have some positions in BABA. What's your take on the news about the conclusion of the 3-year antitrust probe? So I will tell you, I sold my BABA at, it did have a little run and I sold it. But, obviously that is good news. I may regret selling that. I didn't think that it was done running, and I still think it's very undervalued. Not financial advice, my personal opinion.
And just, Tom went to a normal public school. I went to a Catholic school. He went to a normal public school.
Yeah, I mean, if you're answering Alexa, I think if I pronounce that correctly, I just think it's good parenting is the answer. And, good parenting is, talk to your children, stay with them, and pray and hope for the best. There's no guarantees doing everything right. All we can do is pray for our children. That's what I would say to that. So we'll close out this current poll. What do you expect your Bitcoin miner to peak at in this cycle? So, wow, almost straight across 25% across the board. 3x or less, 25%. 4x, it says 4x to 4x, should be 4x to 5x, 25%. 6x to 7x, 25%. 8x or more, 25%. Exactly split, George. A quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. I'm ending that poll at total mass confusion. And it just flipped in between the time I said that and ended it. But so 25% each. So time will tell. The good news is, all of those are good scenarios. Is anybody going to be crying if they 3x, they sell at a 3x from here. That's not a bad outcome. Not everything is a 10x or 50x or almost nothing is, right? Those are. Now, I will say,
Well,
I am searching.
I need a 1x to get back to where I was. So.
Right. That's the first X we need, is just to get back to where we were, and then we need to go from there. That's exactly right. That is a coincidence, King Hazy, but it just worked out that way.
Yeah, Robbie said the right thing. Have dinner at the dinner table. Have conversations. I'm going to tell you, that's the thing I love the most about we did that almost every night with our kids.
Yeah, that is outstanding advice, Robin. Thank you.
And talked about what went on at school, what went on in the world, and just that was, man, you're going to make me cry because like my kids are grown up now and I miss that. They don't live at home anymore. I'm an old man. I'm an original OG.
We got old. That's all right. We're old, but we're young.
Yeah. We're the young old guys.
We didn't talk about the actual news of the day today. PCE came in better than expected. So this is personal consumption expenditures. Allegedly, this is the thing the Fed looks at. But, CPE is 1,000 times more high profile than this. But this came in. The annual PCE inflation rate in the U.S. was unchanged at 2.5% in July, below market forecast of 2.6%. So that beat the forecast. And then I've got an article on this that, let's see. So headline increased 0.2% month over month. That met expectations, and 2.5% year over year. And that beat expectations of 2.6. So again, this all goes to inflation being under control. And this all goes to the Fed being able to lower interest rates. So, this is another data point that gives the Fed cover, but I was surprised to see. I'm going to go here and refresh and see if this will show us. This didn't really move the needle at all. So the debate now, we're ever close to this. We're now, 3 weeks away. September 18th is the next Fed meeting. So the debate for some time now, since we got that disaster, that's the wrong word. It was perceived on that day as a disaster unemployment number. It came in at 4.3%. We were expecting 4.1%. That's when the market panicked. Everything crashed. That was a Friday. That Monday is when Bitcoin flash crashed. And so the debate's been between a 25 basis point rate cut and a 50 basis point rate cut ever since then. No rate cut is off the table. You'll see they don't even show it on the chart. That's built in at 0% chance. So, but this didn't change from yesterday to today. With this new data point, it's changed from 34% chance of a 50 basis point to a 33% chance. So if anything, I thought that would have ticked up a little bit with another good data point giving the Fed cover to lower interest rates. But effectively, this remained the exact same. So still a 2/3% chance of just a 25 basis point rate cut in September. And if you guys remember, for a couple of days at the beginning of August, around that unemployment number, this spiked to like a 75% chance of a 50 basis point rate cut. So this is I'm going to use George's favorite slogan. This is a fluid situation. This chart changes with each data point. So, we're getting very close to the meeting. But we get some numbers next week that
I'm going to tell you something. I think the Fed has lost it.
They've lost their minds?
They've lost their marbles. Because they had the perfect opportunity to lower the rates with the whole 900,000 missing jobs.
Right. This is what I'm saying. It's been data point after data point after data point, giving them cover to do whatever they want at this next meeting within reason, meaning a 50 basis point rate cut. And maybe they will. I don't know.
What-
the
what do you
futures are
think-
saying that they think it's going to be a quarter.
What do you think happens to Bitcoin when they cut rates?
I mean, this is the funny thing of be careful what you wish for, because this is what we've been waiting for and waiting for. The concept was that as rates go down, Bitcoin's going to go up. But, now all of a sudden in the short term, there's this panic that, rates are going down because the economy's bad and we're moving into a recession, and that's going to be bad for Bitcoin and bad for the market. And you can't have it both ways. I still believe that there will be a series of rate cuts, and that is going to help. I don't think it's the main catalyst, but it will be one of many catalysts that propels Bitcoin to the top of its peak in this cycle. That's my belief. And I think before it's done, we're going to have, they're talking about 50 basis points. I think before we're done, over the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to have at least 200 basis points of rate cuts. That's over the next 2 years.
Bitcoin's looking pretty healthy, Tom. I ain't going to lie. It's probably a good time to end the show.
All right. Well,
Up on a high note.
We'll end on a high note. Bitcoin's kind of still hovering around pretty much, right where it was yesterday, a little bit above. So, all right, we had a little bit of a red day with the Bitcoin miners. The one Bitcoin miner that was down the most was Iron, which was down 7%, but it was up 15% yesterday on earnings. So the market loved earnings. It gave some of it back today because, today was a red day, but a pretty non-eventful day today. So, any parting thoughts, George?
No, not really.
I'll just say,
have a good long weekend. Hopefully everybody gets Monday off.
yes, for those of you in the U.S., if you get the day off, enjoy your long weekend, and everybody around the world, enjoy your weekend. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, special thanks to the members. So go Bitcoin. Let's hope September is better than everybody thinks. Have a fantastic weekend, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.